Merci Eric, merci Solovox et tous les poètes. En français, je veux dire quelque chose, Irving Layton est très sexy. All right, so I'm going to do it in English since we promised that we would do it in English. Since Irving Layton was pretty much bilingual, so are most of us here. And if we're not, well, we can imagine what we're saying. So I want to introduce J.D. Hobbes Hickey. He's been telling fables, folk tales, and legends across Canada at spoken word events and festivals for almost 20 years. He has won several storytelling competitions, and his band Tailstrum was named as one of the top spoken word acts in Best of Montreal 2012. He currently hosts the Slamtastic Story Slam, Montreal's only bilingual storytelling competition, now in its 4th year. So I'd like to introduce to you J.D. Hobbes.
Good evening. Bonsoir. So when Betty asked me to take part in this evening tribute to Irving Layton, I picked 3 poems and I will be telling 2 stories. And the first poem is very short, and it's, the ancient kings knew that you should never piss off a poet. Never piss off a bard. Because if you did, they might write something about you that would go on beyond your death. And today, with social media and YouTube, things going viral, it can either make you or break you. So this is the first poem that I found that exemplifies that idea. It's called Vitae Aeternae. At the height of their bitter quarrel, the wretched woman taunted him. Poetry is one thing, life another. And indeed she was right to do so. For her brief days will soon be over, but she will live infamous in his poems forever. This is a poem, and then I'll be telling a story that I thought, it's a story from tradition that came to mind when I found this poem. So it's called The Graveyard by Irving Layton. Lord, I understand the plan. The news is out. I kill him, he kills me, change and change about. And you ever in the right, and no wonder, since it's no great matter who's up, who's under. Teuton or slave, Arab or suffering Jew. Nature, justice, God, they're all one to you. The lion breeds the lamb and the antelope, as evil breeds good, darkness, light, despair, hope. And though your scheme confounds theologians' wits, all come and go sired by the opposites, and they decree he who slays and he who's slain. Leave no excellent world, no crimson stain. The tragic warring creatures that here have breath, and reconciled in their partnership of death, and death akin to art, and artists please, to the measure that they have stilled the contraries. Energy must crackle on a silent urn. Nothing catches fire, though Jerusalem burn. And the lion posed on the poor Bach to spring, hold in his furious jaws no suffering. Motion and rest, love and hate, heaven and hell, here cease their punch and Judy show, all is well. There is no pain in the graveyard, or the voice whispering in the tombstones, rejoice, rejoice. Irving Layton. So once upon a time, there was a hunter, and every year he made preparations to go and hunt the great stag. And because his son was of age in this particular year, he decided to take his son with him. And so the 2 men prepared their supplies and their packs, and they left the house. And they traveled from their village, and they crossed the meadows, and they crossed the roads, and they came to a dense woods at the base of a very tall mountain range. And they were making their way through the woods when the son turned to his father and he said, "Father, why don't we take the shortcut through the mountains? It would be much faster than going through this dense wood." And the hunter said, "No, my son, for you don't know that in that mountain range there is a ghoul. And unsuspecting travelers make their way into those mountains, well, they're never heard from again. No, no. We will take the long way. And so the two men made their way through the dense forest, and when they finally came to the end of it, there was a clearing, and the hunter could tell that the stag was near. So he turned to his son and he said, "Make camp right here. Wait for me. I will hunt the stag, and if I'm lucky, I'll bring it back." And so the son began to make camp, and the hunter brought all of his skills to the fore, and he hunted the stag. He hunted the stag across the great plain, and he hunted the stag through the woods, and he hunted the stag into the mountains and the hills. And he would catch sight of it now and then, and he would continue to chase after it, but the sun began to set in the mountains, and he knew that he had failed to catch the stag that day, so he was going to return to his son, return to the camp, and maybe try again the next day. But when he came to the camp that was made at the edge of the clearing, the tent was set, and there was a fire, but there was no sign of his son. All he could find of him was his cloak lying in the grass. And a horrible feeling took hold of his heart. And he brought all of his skills of hunting to the fore, and he hunted now for his son. And he followed the trail of his son through the woods, and he followed the trail to the base of the mountain, and without even thinking, he went into that mountain range, and he followed the trail, hunting for his son, until finally he came to a cave. And in this cave there was a light of a fire burning. And he peered around the corner and looked inside that cave, and what he saw chilled his blood. For there was a fire burning, and dancing around the fire was the ghoul. And her belly was full. And as she danced, her breasts waved back and forth, and her hair dangled down low across her shoulders. And she smiled, and her teeth were white, sharp, and stained with blood. And the hunter took his knife, and he sprang at the ghoul, and he killed her with one blow. And he used his knife to cut open her belly, and out tumbled the body of his son. He wrapped his son up in his hunting cloak, and he made his way down the mountain, and he made his way through the forest, and he made his way across the roads in the great plain until he returned home. And his wife was surprised to see him as he came into the house, and he placed the bundle on the table. And she said, "Husband, I did not expect you for many days. Did you capture the great stag? What is this bundle?" But before she could ask any other questions, the hunter said, "Wife, I need you to find me a pot that has never cooked a meal eaten in sorrow." Now, the wife was going to ask more questions. It was an odd request, but there was something in his voice. And so she went to the neighbors. She knocked on the door, and she asked them if they had a pot that had never cooked a meal eaten in sorrow. But the neighbors looked at her and said, "Do you not remember when our father did not return from the wars? Our family all came together, and we cooked the funeral meal. We used every pot in the house. I'm sorry. We do not have such a pot." And so the wife went to the near neighbors, and she knocked on the door, and she made the same request. And they said, "Do you not remember when our own daughter miscarried her child? The family came together to mourn that death, and we used every pot in the house to cook the meal. No, I'm sorry. We do not have such a pot that has never cooked a meal eaten in sorrow." And so the wife continued on through the village, neighbor after neighbor, house after house, knocking on the doors, making the request, but no one could help her. So she returned home. And she went to her husband and she said, "I'm sorry, my husband. I could not find in all of the village a pot that has never cooked a meal eaten in sorrow." And when she said this, the hunter removed the cloak from the body of their son, and he said, "Then know this, my wife, as we cook our own funeral meal for our son, we do not grieve alone." I put my glasses in a place so I would not forget where they were. And then I forgot to put them on. All right. The third poem I have is called Love's Diffidence by Irving Layton. Love is so diffident a thing. I scoop up my hands with air, and I do not find it there, nor in my friend's pleasure, nor when birds sing. I am confused, forsaken, I have lost the way. Love's not as men say, in woman's eyes, blue or gray, nor in kisses given and taken. Love, I call out, find me spinning in error. Display your dank, coarse hair, your bubs and bulbous shoulder, then strike, witless bitch, blind me. Irving Layton. So, unsurprisingly, I will tell you a story about love. I'm going to tell you a story of love. I'm going to tell you a story of lust. I'm going to tell you a story about fear, hope, and madness. Now, this story is so old that back then even the immortal gods were young. Now, the gods had just finished creating the world. They created the land, the seas, and the sky. They created the mountains, the rivers, and the trees. And they created all the human emotions. But before they created the human beings themselves, the immortal gods took the world's first union break. Our first Beaux Saints gathering. Now, while the gods rested, the emotions were kind of sitting around looking at each other, not knowing what to do with themselves, and boredom cried out. He said, I'm bored. I've got nothing to do. Wait, said creativity. I've just invented a game called hide and seek. One of us will count to 100, the others will hide, and then the person doing the counting will seek the others. And everyone got very excited because, well, numbers had just been created, so everyone was anxious to try them out. But who would do the counting? Oh, I'll count, said Madness. I'll do the counting. So they looked at Madness and he started to count. 1, 69, 45, 11, 13, 100. No, said the other emotions. You can't count them all out of order like that. You've got to count all the numbers from 1 to 100 in order. But I'm Madness, he said. I can't do it the normal way. I've got to do it my way. So inspiration whispered in Madness's ear, and his eyes brightened up, and he started to count. 1, 100, 2, 99, 3, 98, 4, 97, and so on and so forth, and all the emotions went off to hide, and finally, Madness got to the end of his count. 49, 51, 50, ready or not, here I come. And immediately he tripped over Apathy, who couldn't even be bothered to get up from his spot. And he fell down a hole, and at the bottom he found Fear cowering there. He crawled out of that hole, and then he spotted Hope hiding in a puffy white cloud. And that's when he noticed Indecision, who was hiding behind a tree, but then he went to hide behind a rock. But no, wait, the tree was better. He went back to the tree. No, the rock was more comfortable. And of course he was spotted. In between the tree and the rock, there was a pile of hay that was vibrating for some unknown reason. And Madness went over and uncovered the hay, and there he found Lust doing unspeakable things. But that's another story. And so on and so forth, and Madness found all the emotions, but he could not figure out where Love was hiding. Because Love thought it would be very romantic if she hid herself inside of a rose bush. But of course, Madness didn't know that. And Madness was getting so angry, he was stomping his feet with his hands in the air. Where could she be hiding? I've searched everywhere on the earth, because back then the earth was much smaller, and it didn't take as much time, but he just had no idea where she was. And when he walked past the rose bush, where Love was hiding, without thinking, he took his 2 hands, and he thrust them inside very suddenly. And it was a horrible scream. And out stepped Love. She had her hands over her eyes, and blood was oozing between her fingers. When she lowered her hands, everyone could see that she'd been blinded by the thorns in that bush. Madness felt horrible. He fell to his knees before her, and he said, I'm so sorry. He said, it was an accident. I had no idea you were in there. Please, tell me how I can make this up to you. And Love said, now that you've taken my sight, you will have to be my eyes from now until all eternity. So from that day to this day, and all the days in between, Love is blind, but she is guided by madness.